Tanya, and thank you very much everyone for the opportunity to be with you once again here today. Can I begin by acknowledging the Whadjuk people of the proud Noongar Nation, the traditional owners on the land in which we are meeting here today, and give thanks for sharing this incredible country with them and acknowledge their elders past and present. Can also acknowledge other people in the room, Shane Love MLA, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and the Honourable Wilson Tucker MLC, Member for the Upper House. I'd like to acknowledge Rebecca Brown, the Director General of the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, and Professor Peter Klinken, Chief Scientist and Energizer Bunny. And we're here on Whadjuk country today in the beautiful season, as Len has said, of Camberang, which is characterised by bright bursts of colour from the flowers in bloom and a warm change in the weather. And the cyclists and runners in the room will also have noticed that, to your peril, the coolbardis, or magpies, are out protecting their nests at the moment as well. Most importantly though, this is a season of change and transformation, which is a very fitting observation for our discussion today. Can I acknowledge Diane Smith-Gander, the Chair of CEDA, and your team, and thank you very much once again for hosting this important event, and my great friend Len Collard for his wonderful welcome to country, and Dania for your kind introduction. Indeed, it is a great honour to be invited to present the keynote address at this forum for the second year in a row. Last year, I outlined my vision for WA, a vision that would see us at the forefront of a cleaner, greener, and more tech-savvy economy that provides high-quality jobs for West Australians. To be a state that harnesses its competitive advantages, to build outwards from traditional industries to diversify the economy. To be a state that combines culture, community, and commerce and brings them together in a uniquely West Australian way. A state that engages our incredible national assets, celebrates our Aboriginal culture, and empowers our people to be proud of where we live. And a vision for Perth to be the capital of the Indian Ocean, and for WA, the gateway to Australia. Importantly, I also framed this in a time frame, and I want to see this achieved by 2035. And now I'm an impatient person by nature. I like to set goals and get on with it. So, what have we done so far? Well, a fair amount. In some ways, it has been a classic game of two halves since my speech last year. For the first 6 months, from October to March, the international borders were shut. So there was a strong internal focus while getting prepared for what lay ahead. The second 6 months, from when the borders opened to now, has seen a vigorous renewal of our goals, global ambitions. I've been fortunate in my roles with the McGowan government to straddle both ends of the spectrum. I played a leading strategic role in the relentless day-to-day battle with COVID. The number of decisions, both large and small, we made were quite extraordinary. But we avoided the worst of the pandemic, and the nation's economic engine room continued to thrive on the back of a great working partnership between the government and the resources industry. And keeping people safe and keeping people working was a key goal at that time, and one that we largely succeeded. But can I take the opportunity today to acknowledge those people who have done it tough during COVID-19, those whose businesses weren't able to survive, and those who weren't able to keep their jobs. But we did have some success, and that success should not be underestimated. Staying safe and keeping our community strong provided a terrific platform to build upon for WA. I've also found my different portfolios have complemented each other in driving our COVID recovery. As State Development Minister, I have responsibility for 64 state agreements, and during the past year, state agreement project approvals resulted in capital expenditure by the private sector of $1.3 billion. Trade gives me the responsibility for overseeing our network of trade and investment offices around the world, which have been rebuilt and revitalised in the past year, but more on this later. My jobs portfolio is obviously self-explanatory, but with more than 165,000 jobs having been created since we came to government, I don't need to tell you in this room how vital it is that we keep thousands more, that we create thousands more, while continuing to attract more workers from the state. And my work as chair of the Jobs Task Force and the LNG Jobs Task Force is providing some meat to the bones in terms of the government's agenda in this area. Science allows me to spend time with future thinkers such as the Energizer Bunny, who I expect will be his usual relentless bundle of energy and ideas on the panel after my speech. Commerce keeps me grounded in the lives and challenges of all Western Australians, particularly in relation to microeconomic reform and consumer protection. And finally, tourism. It may look glamorous with its big, bold advertising campaigns, but underneath this, there is a hard economic lens put over attracting visitors to WA to drive economic returns and jobs for local businesses. In 2019, the tourism industry represented over $13 billion worth of economic activity and employed over 100,000 people. We want to see that double in the coming decade as we look to significantly expand the tourism sector. And when the international borders lifted, I distilled these portfolios into one simple message. WA is open for business and open for tourism. It was a deliberate strategy to send a strong message that WA, the safest place in the world, with the strongest economy in the world, was ready and waiting with open arms and an open mind. The tourism portfolio actually provided an interesting lesson with broader implications. When global international travel stopped, it effectively reset everyone's tourism market share to zero. There was no market leader. Every country in every state had to start again from the same zero base. So when borders reopened, it ignited the most hotly contested tourism marketing battle the world has ever seen. Everyone is trying to stand out. And Western Australia can't outspend our competitors, but we can outsmart them. That's why our Walking on a Dream campaign pitched WA as a dreamlike but sophisticated destination with a strong connection to nature and culture. And I can see similarities between the tourism reset to zero and what's happening in the wider business world at the moment. So many businesses are rethinking about how they operate. Apart from being impatient, I'm also optimistic. And I see this as a time of opportunity. WA is being seen in a new light around the world, and we are looking at the world with fresh eyes and fresh perspectives. And what we are seeing, though, is a world very different to the one before COVID. The economic landscape is continually shifting, driven by rising geopolitical tensions and changing trade dynamics. The bans on Russian exports of oil and other fossil fuels by most advanced Western countries, including Australia, are progressively taking effect. The net result is a drop in world energy supply and sharp increases in the price of energy commodities as the world looks to find alternatives to Russian natural gas. This global uncertainty is causing instability everywhere, especially in the UK, where the removalists have been kept busy at number 10 with 3 prime ministers in 2 months. This is all happening against the backdrop of the world rapidly digitising and automating business operations. Closer to home, we have a new Australian government with a mandate to deliver stronger climate action change, empower First Nations people, and support local industry development and job creation. Experts may be forecasting a global recession, but as Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers noted, the best buffer against global uncertainty is strong economic management. It is why we are using our safe and stable economy in WA as both a protection and a launchpad. We are transforming our state into a more sustainable, smarter and diversified economy that is competitive on a global scale. And I'll use those themes, sustainable, smarter, diversified, to highlight the progress we've made in the past year. Western Australia is a secure and reliable supplier for our partners overseas, but that is not enough. Today, competitiveness and sustainability go hand in hand. More than ever, investors are demanding governments and industry strengthen their environment, social and governance commitments to deliver more positive outcomes for the community and environment. This trend is only set to increase, spurring a rapid rise in sustainable investment. In 2021, over $1.6 trillion worth of ESG bonds were issued globally, and this is more than twice the previous year. Western Australia is strongly positioned to be a supplier of choice. We have the right ingredients to deliver the best ESG outcomes, boasting the mindset, the people, technology, resources, geography, and the determination needed to thrive. To this end, I'm pleased to be launching the Western Australian Industry ESG Information Pack today. An important part of securing our position as a leading ethical supplier of choice is raising awareness about the incredible work our industries are delivering. This new document informs investors about the delivery of ESG outcomes across the state's priority sectors as identified in the Diversified WA strategy. Benchmarks ESG ambitions with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And it includes 38 different case studies highlighting leading examples of industry-led ESG initiatives and credentials. One of those case studies is Horizon Power and the work that they are doing. And so I'm pleased that Horizon's CEO, Stephanie Unwin, will be joining us on the panel today. The ESG document adds to other important initiatives we've made in the past year, especially the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Bill, which passed through Parliament in December. This bill provides the state with the most modern and robust framework for Aboriginal cultural heritage management in Australia. And we are also making significant headway towards creating a more sustainable, low-carbon economy. The state government has set out its aspirations for net zero emissions by 2050 and committed to our WA climate policy to make this a reality. This comes at a time when a renewed pledge to decarbonisation from the Commonwealth Government has transformed perceptions of Australia on the international stage. Earlier this year, we committed that all WA government agencies will be required to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to 80% below 2020 levels by 2030. In addition, the government is investing over $660 million to support Collie's long-term future, attract new industries and creating new local jobs after the announcement that the state's coal-fired power stations will be retired in 2030. Today, Collie is laying the foundations for Western Australia to power a smarter, more dynamic future. And these are ambitious but achievable targets. In May this year, we announced an additional $500 million investment into the Climate Action Fund, bringing the total to $1.25 billion to ensure WA's low-carbon future. On top of this, we've committed almost $60 million to accelerate the use of low-emission vehicles. And throughout 2020, the government has continued to its close engagement with industry by holding a series of ministerial roundtables with senior WA business leaders. And to support this transition, we plan to invest $3.8 million in new green power infrastructure in the Southwest Interconnected System, including wind generation and storage, to ensure continued supply, stability and affordability for businesses and households. Now let's turn to the second of these three themes, smarter. In Western Australia, science, technology and innovation are being applied on a world-leading scale. Across the state's resources industry, we see remote and autonomous vehicles continually evolving and operating over thousands of kilometres. Not only is the industry at the beating heart of the nation's economy, WA's tech sector is growing at twice the rate of the nation. WA is a world leader in autonomous systems, artificial intelligence, robotics, remote operations and microgrid management. We have the world's largest robot, an autonomous train, and more than 400 autonomous haul trucks operating across the Pilbara, and the most powerful supercomputer in the Southern Hemisphere. Western Australia is now in a unique position to build on the successes of the resources sector while leveraging its advances in both skills and technology to foster the growth of new and emerging industries. Our health and medical life sciences sector and primary industries are applying a range of innovative technologies to support social and environmental outcomes. This week, WA is hosting AusBiotech 2022 and AusBiotech Invest 2022 for the first time in over a decade, with a number of international delegations and representatives from the US, Korea, Singapore and India. Our medtech sector is one of the fastest growing in the nation. Our clinical trial capability is globally renowned. It supported the world through COVID vaccine developments with novel vaccine trials. 6 of the 13 Australian FDA-approved drugs were developed right here in WA, and 3 of those utilising frontier RNA technology. Clearly, we're punching well above our weight and contributing to improving the lives and health of patients here and around the world. Our rapidly emerging space industry is also a prime example of how WA is building a smarter economy. And we've got some of the team here from Arose, and it's great to see you all here. And it's great to see Dawn McIntosh on the panel today. Dawn is the Space Systems Director at Fugro. Today, Western Australia is involved in a range of space operations and hosts significant space infrastructure for both civil and defence applications. One of those is the European Space Agency, which I visited in Frankfurt this year. The agency is building a second deep space antenna in New Norcia as part of its ES-Track network to provide continuous coverage to spacecraft almost anywhere in the solar system. And when I was in Germany, I had an important document tucked under my arm while visiting Fugro 500, visiting Fortune 500 company BASF. BASF is one of the world's largest chemical manufacturers, including battery materials. That document was a new prospectus, grandly titled Western Australia, a Global Battery and Critical Minerals Hub. It's a racy little read. I thoroughly recommend it. And what the prospectus did was bring together how WA is the perfect position to be both a supplier and downstream manufacturer of battery materials, because all the critical minerals needed for the world's transition to renewables, wind, solar and battery storage are all here in WA. WA is a leading supplier of lithium, world's top producer last year, the second supplier of cobalt in the world, the 4th largest supplier of rare earths, and the 5th of nickel and 8th of manganese. But Western Australia is also the only jurisdiction in the world where you can find every element of a lithium or vanadium ion battery here in Western Australia. In May this year, Tianqi Lithium produced Australia's first battery-grade lithium hydroxide down in my neck of the woods in Kwinana. And just to blow Kwinana's trumpet a little bit more, BHP Nickel West commenced operations at its battery-grade nickel sulfate plant in Kwinana last year as well. And major investments by Lynas Rare Earths and Iluka Resources are set to establish our state as one of the few jurisdictions in the world to offer processed rare earths outside China. Collie is another great case study on how we are progressing towards our bold vision for the state. As I said, the government is investing $660 million to support Collie's long-term future, and we are excited about its future, albeit one without coal-fired power stations. And finally, throughout this year, I've been championing our diversification strategy at every opportunity. As I emphasised last year, my vision is to develop a more diversified WA economy that is sustainable and delivers long-term economic and social benefit for the community. To achieve this, we must continue to attract investors to work with our thriving domestic businesses. And earlier this year, I launched the $180 million Investment Attraction Fund to encourage new investment in WA to create jobs and increase demand for local goods and services. I find it really encouraging. There have been over 200 expressions of interest in the fund, which are now being assessed for early granting. And I said at the beginning of this speech that the past year has been a game of two halves. The first 6 months on internal focus, while the second half turbocharged our reconnection to the world. And since March, the WA government has embarked on 10 ministerial international missions. I've been to the UK, Germany, India, Indonesia, and will return there again in December, and Singapore, while my ministerial colleagues have been to the Gulf, South Korea, and the United States. The Premier, being the selfless soul that he is, took one for the team by going to Rome as part of the direct flights. He said, "No, Roger, I know you're busy. I know you want to go because you're so selfless, but I'll do this for you." "Thanks," said I. And look, these missions have an important strategic focus. They have been aligned to global trends and key market interests. Yes, we've all got used to Zoom, Teams and WebEx, but nothing beats spending time with people face to face. And so with my colleague David Templeman, I had the honour of leading Western Australia's largest ever business delegation, where we went to India in July. The Invest and Trade mission included 110 representatives from over 73 organisations across a range of state sectors, including all those mentioned as part of our Diversified WA. That mission was about opening doors and helping to make introductions. In fact, we made so many introductions that I feel the T20 Cup doubleheader on Sunday is going to feel like a reunion, judging from the number of Indian businessmen and ministers flying in for the game. The mission was a huge success. For example, advanced vanadium developer Technology Metals Australia recently signed an MOU with Tata Steel, one of the largest steel makers. This was great news to further highlight the battery and critical minerals opportunities WA has to offer global investors. As part of the mission, I announced the WA government will open a new investment and trade office in Chennai in 2023. I'm also proud to announce that as part of the government's expanded international network, we will also have a presence in Frankfurt, Kuala Lumpur, Ho Chi Minh City and Manila. These new locations will complement our existing offices in Jakarta, Singapore, Shanghai, Dubai, Mumbai, Tokyo, Seoul and London. And this expanded international network will be critical for promoting Western Australia's competitive strengths and attraction for talent, investment, technology, and businesses that we need for our bold vision for the state. So 364 days ago, I stood at this forum and shared a vision for our state: smart, agile, targeted and self-assured, attracting talent from around the globe. My vision is that by 2035, Western Australia is the destination for those of you with the biggest dreams, confident in the knowledge that our state will support your ambitions. I'm proud to say that a year later, while we have faced seismic shifts in the global economic landscape and we continue to weather the storm and adapting to meet these challenges, we are seizing the opportunities which arise from disruption and positioning our state to achieve long-term sustained growth, to be a secure and reliable provider to our international partners with world-leading ESG credentials. We have the resources, we have the capability, we have the location and the space. And most importantly, under this government, we are investing in strengthening our foundations. I'm immensely proud of what we have achieved as a state together this year, but I'm also conscious that there is so much more to do. Together, I know we can achieve great things for Western Australia and for all Western Australians. And I invite you to join me on this journey as business leaders, as technologists, entrepreneurs, adventurers and dreamers. Let's be bold together for the future of Western Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Can I invite you now, take your seat, and join the panellists for what I'm sure will be an interesting and I expect very lively conversation. So our panellists today are very well known to many of you. John McIntosh, Space Systems Director from Fugro, Dr. Marcus Tan, Founder and CEO of Healthengine, Stephanie Unwin, Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Power, and Professor Peter Klinken, AC Chief Scientist of Western Australia, also known as the Energizer Bunny. I also introduce Ruth Callaghan, Director and Chief Innovation Officer of Canning's Purple, who will moderate the panel discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic, and thank you so much, Deputy Premier, for your presentation. I'd just like to express my delight at also being on Whadjuk Noongar country and to see so many people here in this room who are equally passionate about the opportunities for Western Australia. So I think what I will do is I'll start with you, Deputy Premier. You've outlined an amazing, sorry, I apologise, I'm going to skip the housekeeping, so allow me to give you that first. I will just note that just as with all CEDA events, there is an opportunity for you to put questions through our Q&A portal, which is available via the link on your table or for those watching live. Otherwise, you can enter your details by going to ceda.pigeonhole.at and using the password WA2035. You can post your own questions and, more importantly, you can vote on other people's questions if you think that they're worth putting forward immediately. And you can put for your questions at any time. We'll endeavour to answer as many of those as possible. If you are in the room today and you would like to ask a question directly, just raise your hand and we will bring a microphone to you. Just as always, please state your name and organisation so that we know who you are, and please keep your questions as brief as you can to allow time for others. And I will also add, please do also join the conversation on Twitter if you have it, using today's hashtag diversifyWA and tagging CEDA News. Now, Deputy Premier. So I'd really like to ask, that vision that you've outlined today is not just about diversifying our economy, but it really is also about diversifying our perception of ourselves as West Australians. Can you tell me how you have found the willingness of the people you've spoken to over the last year through the collabs and through other events to go down this path?
Look, I think there's a huge appetite out there for people to go on this journey, as they say in the classics. You know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can you do as much as you like in terms of saying this is where we should go and this is what we should do. But unless we, as a community, decide as one that that's going to be who we are, I think we'll continue to struggle to escape. You know, and it's ridiculous to say escape. You know, because it's provide us with such wealth, but escape the current economic strategies around dig and grow. We need to make sure that we don't just fall in that lazy habit of chasing the next high price point in terms of mineral resources or oil and gas. And we need to make sure that we I think, put that discipline on ourselves to really stretch ourselves and reach beyond what we are currently doing, because we know that we're capable of doing more, and it's about people believing that we are capable of doing more. I think the CEDA collabs have really demonstrated that there's a huge wealth of enthusiasm out there for this approach.
You've given us a really clear destination of where you want us to be in 2035, which I'm going to start saying is 13 years from now. It's very soon. It sounds like it's a lot further away than it is. That's the destination. You've also talked about the enablers, so science, innovation, having the right people, having the right collaboration. How do you see those enablers working together to get us to that point?
Well, I think that the other enabler, which is obviously absolutely crucial in each of the collabs that I participated in, it always came back down to the question of workforce. It's a people thing. Technology is people. You know, all industry is people. And it's, I think we really need to make sure that as a community, we continue to create a great environment for people to come and live, work and grow their families. I was in UK earlier in the year, as I said, and I was fortunate enough to see a speech by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who's this week's Prime Minister. And there they were essentially making a policy pitch that said, if you're a graduate from a top 50 university anywhere in the world, you and your family can come and live, work and play in the UK for 3 years, no questions asked. And I think that really drove home to me that just how in this sort of like globally and digitally enabled world, people are going to be at the heart of how we transform our economies.
Fantastic. I am receiving some questions coming through, but I might circle around and come back to the Deputy Premier on a couple of those. I do want to ask about the energy transition, and I might bring Stephanie in here on this from Horizon Power. Energy is obviously a massive part of this process. We've got incredible strengths as a state in energy, but the transition picture is a really exciting one. Can you tell me a little bit about how Horizon Power is working with this? And I'm thinking particularly of your case study in Denham.
Absolutely. Yeah, Denham's really interesting because one of the single biggest problems we've got to solve in the energy transition is how you firm up green energy. So how do we create firm renewables is sort of the way we chat about it in the industry. And so there's a whole bunch of problems you've got to solve to do that. And there'll be a whole bunch of technologies that support how you actually deliver 24/7 green energy. And one of them will be, sort of traditional sort of battery technology. But what we've done in Denham is said, well, that won't always be the right answer for us. Let's have a look at seeing whether we can try hydrogen as a production source that we can then deploy back into the grid in order to firm up those renewables. So pretty exciting project, and we thought about it a couple of years ago, and luckily had the foresight to order the electrolyser back then, because there's a lot of delays these days if you're after electrolysers. But we're commissioning now, so we've already produced hydrogen in Denham, and the way our project works is that we've taken, in a sense, we've doubled the size of a little wind farm that we have up there, and we've dedicated half of its production just 24/7 to making hydrogen through electrolysis. The idea then is that you compress it, you make it smaller, you store it, and then when the sun's not shining, we can then use a fuel cell to then pump it back out into the grid. And that's going to, I guess, provide 24/7 green energy to about 100 homes in Denham. And it's pretty exciting, right, that we've got to solve some of these things. And I'm talking tiny little numbers here. So you're all probably hearing gigawatts, gigawatts the new megawatts. I'm talking kilowatts, which is like so small. But if we don't try, we don't get started. So someone has to try some of this stuff. And that's what I love about Horizon, that we can try this stuff in a way that's, reasonably, safe and reliable. We've got the backup. It's a good time to do it. Let's see if it works. And if it does what we think, why don't we scale up and get going? So that's what Denham's all about.
It's a fantastic example, I think, of some of the experimentation that is taking place in WA. And I'm going to ask Peter, because I know that energy transition is a conversation that seems to feature in almost all your conversations with people. How do you see some of the work that we're doing here in that space?
Oh, I think we are the best placed jurisdiction on the planet to undergo an orderly transition towards a renewable future. Energy security has just really come to the forefront recently. We have just seen how critical that is from a geopolitical level, from supply chain levels and so on. For Western Australia, energy security is critical, not just for keeping the lights and water going, keeping our industry going. It's crucial for our water supply. 2/3 of our water comes from desal, energy intensive. 1/3 comes from pumping water up from aquifers. If you don't have the energy, you're in trouble. So we have to have energy security to provide water security, which then provides food security. So all of these things are interlinked. And so for me, the big opportunity that we've got here in Western Australia, as the Deputy Premier said, we've got solar, we've got wind like nowhere else, we've got every element necessary to make lithium-ion and vanadium-ion batteries. We need to package this up in such a way that presents us as the best destination globally to be doing this. And we're starting to really do that. And I got to say, there was a racy read that I had while I was in Germany. It was called, WA, the hub for critical minerals, right? Talk about a geek. And I'm an Energizer bunny, apparently. I'm not the state's uber geek anymore. But that, to me, was a prospectus that summarised and brought together all the elements that WA can offer. There's nowhere else like it, right? And so when we get our narrative right and we present our calling cards, people go, really? That's actually quite amazing. So if I could just go on one little bit more, I was on another delegation with Minister Dawson to the States, and we met with some of the biggest companies on the planet who are interested in bringing data centres to WA. Why? Because we've got the potential for green, clean, reliable, cheap energy, and we've got plenty of land. So, we've got all the cards are there in front of us. We've got to play them right and make sure we don't fall behind where someone else over in the corner there's got a pair of twos and outbids us.
It's a really interesting point that we have so many strengths. And I mean, we're actually are spoilt for choice in many ways. And I want to bring in Marcus Tan at this point because, Marcus, you sit across two sectors where we have traditionally lost people out of WA to do things elsewhere, but you have managed to work in both health and in technology and do exceptionally well. Where do you see our ability to bring together a bit more collaboration through academia, research, in terms of philanthropy, government? What do you think needs to happen in those two sectors?
Yeah, so look, the collab that was actually happening, I think a couple of months ago, was actually an incredibly good example of how if you can bring a bunch of people together from the different sectors, we can actually come up with some really, really great considered and sort of a path forward for the sector. So you have no doubt that the pedigree in WA of medical research is there. We've got Nobel Prize winners, we've got the national treasures in our Fionas, and there's some incredible stuff happening at Telephone Kids Institute, Perkins, and I think that's a really great base to actually build off. I think and Roger's sort of numbers about how technology and health are actually the fastest growing nationally probably doesn't quite tell you the full story, because actually the consensus in the room at the collab was that whilst we've got assets, and I think Peter was there as well, was that we actually are starting off with a low base. So we do need to build on the momentum that we've got. And as a small state, it's not really easy to build a massive growth business out of something that's got such a small population. But we seem to manage to do it. And that's only because if we can get the critical mass of coordination and cooperation, rather than competition and fragmentation, which can sometimes happen, you're much more likely to meet that critical mass and actually get the traction that you need. And we're actually there. So I think the consensus at the collab was certainly around that there's a window of opportunity where research and academia are working very closely with industry, and actually there's a huge engagement from government as well. And I had to commend Minister Dawson, who has actually been another Energizer bunny as far as I can tell, and actually been engaged with the entire sector. And that's the first time in a long time that we've actually started to see government play a huge role in wanting to work with industry and work with research organisations. And I think it's a huge opportunity.
I can see the Deputy Premier taking notes beside me, so I'm going to just flick back to this one here. But there's often been a concern from government around how it walks the line between picking winners and playing to our strengths. And I think when I see you nodding at what you're hearing so far, how do you see us taking that step forward?
Well, look, and you're right, it's an uncomfortable space for all governments because you don't want to... what you want is to create a competitive but neutrally competitive environment for everyone to be able to thrive if they have those opportunities. But there's also a role for government to play that policy leadership role. And some of that is to point to industry sectors and areas of the state where you want to see that development take place. So whether it's the development of strategic industrial areas for, to try to direct capital to move to those particular parts of the world, or whether it's about providing something like the Investment Attraction Fund, which sends signals or markers more than providing grants, but simply providing, I think, that leadership. That's, I think, the role for government, because we know that the business community is capable. We know that they're ambitious. We know that they're terrific operators. So we need to simply provide a way that we can support and provide that leadership role, rather than dominating and picking winners within that context.
It's a nice segue, I think, into one area where you have to have government involved. You can't possibly avoid it, and that's space. So, and Dawn, you've got an incredible story. You've got 20 years with NASA. You have made a very big move to WA, and we are delighted to have you. I will ask you why WA, but I also want to learn some of your secrets about how do we get more of you.
There's actually more of me in the room. There's several former NASA employees, even in this room, let alone in Perth. There's more than a handful now. So while I was at NASA, I was fortunate enough to be able to lead multiple space missions, several of them. 2 of them are launching this year, so fingers crossed that those go well. And I will tell you, building spacecraft is super fun. If you get a chance to do it, you should totally do it. It really is fun. And actually, go talk to Rose. Hopefully we will get a chance to have you build spacecraft. So we'll be doing that in WA for sure. So I could have done that for the rest of my career. I would have been, had a great time and no regrets. But in that process, what I was, there's just weaknesses in all these processes, right? As these complicated systems that you're doing. And in that process of building unique spacecraft each and every time, I was discovering that there was some components of it that we were doing uniquely each time, and I didn't think needed to be that specialized for the mission we were flying. And so it was something that started just to gnaw at me just a bit, and opportunistically through another former NASA person who was here in Perth, I was put in touch with Fugro and Rose and the work that's happening, and discovered that they're doing the thing that was gnawing at me and solving that problem, and that is creating a mission operations capability for multiple missions that's infrastructure focused rather than mission focused. And discovered that this was an investment by WA Gov and the Australian Space Agency and Fugro themselves, and realized that this is the thing where we can create a capability for the country and then globally, and we can be global leaders in that area. And I thought that I just have to come participate in this. I just really want to do that. And it's also, and I really want to lean on that investment is really visionary, right? Like, there wasn't a space mission asking for a mission operations center. It was something that they looked at, WA government and others took a look at and said, we have a capability in remote operations in WA, and that can be applied to multiple domains. How can we expand that concept? How can we expand that thought process and put it forth into the space domain? They're right. This is an area. It's going to be a growing area. We're going to have high utilization of this type of infrastructure, and I think that it's one of the areas. I couldn't resist. I had to come participate in it.
We're very, very pleased to have you.
Thank you.
It's an interesting point you make that effectively what you're seeing there is capability-led diversification in WA, that we have a capability and we apply it in new ways. And that seems to be the way that we've developed in many, many opportunities. But the feedstock for that has got to be the skills, the talent, the people coming through. Okay. And I've got a question here. With most of the developed world competing for the talent, how are we selling that value proposition? I was amazed at how many things you mentioned. The world's largest robot, that was news to me, and I think a couple of other people that were surprised in the room. But how are we telling these stories?
Well, I have the great opportunity to tell some of these stories, particularly through the tourism portfolio. And I know, and again, people go on tourism, that's not really a serious part of the economy. It really is. It's important because it's a projection about what we believe we are and who we are. And, you sort of think of someone like Dawn or someone who's sitting in Houston at the moment. They've got an offer to go work in this place called Perth, Western Australia. They're going to click on the computer, they're going to look at that, and so we need to think about, okay, who are we? How do we want to talk about ourselves? I'm very proud of the Walking on a Dream campaign, because that will be the front door for a lot of people when they confront this stuff. We have international events in Perth. There's a reason for that. Obviously, there's the tourist component, but it is about projecting Western Australia to the rest of the world. And it's a battle for hearts and minds. And so all this stuff plays an important role in terms of really making sure that we frame Western Australia in the way that we want.
Well, I'll open it to the others on the panel as well. In your sectors, are we doing well enough in terms of attracting talent? Is there more that we should be doing that you can identify?
Do you want me to start?
Go on.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like when I talked about, say, the hydrogen example, that's a really new space in the world. And what we find is that we're actually kind of creating those skill sets from scratch from our existing knowledge base. We've got so many amazing engineers and project managers and all of the skills that you need here. And what we're finding is that we're learning as we're doing it. So the difficulty that comes with integrating renewables is amazing. And I know that whenever I'm invited to speak and participate in industry forums, it's almost like a fan club comes around the work that's happening in this space because people are really drawn to it. So it's a bit like Dawn said, she was sort of drawn to this amazing mission. People are drawn to this sector because the energy transition is so difficult but also so exciting. And I think that we are going to be a draw card. We have to overcome some things like housing. So we've got this difficulty of having a great amount of work to do, but finding it really hard to find housing for people. But I think we'll be able to overcome those issues. My sense is that we are creating the talent from within, and therefore we are a draw card. And when you add to that the quality, the amazing quality of life that we have here, it's a fairly compelling proposition.
Can I chip in on that one? It's the Energizer Bunny, it's just gone off. Oh, that's my pacemaker, sorry. God, terrible dad jokes, aren't they? They don't get better, sorry. Like he's squirming in the corner over there. If I could just follow up on what the Deputy Premier said. We are in a global battle for talent. It's as simple as that. The challenge is, how do you attract people to come here? You've got to have a value proposition. We've heard what attracted Dawn to come here. We've also got to have a value proposition for people to stay here. We've got to make sure that our talented students and graduates want to stay here. There's a guy called Richard Florida who came up with the Global Creativity Index, and he said there's a group, the fastest growing group that he imagines in the world is called the creative class, and they follow three things: talent, technology and tolerance. And I think we've got it in spades. But we need to tell that story so that people go, wow, that's the place I really want to be.
Fantastic. I will ask, we tend to look across the seas very often for talent, but there are also other states in Australia, I hear. So are we potentially telling our story well enough on the national stage? And to that point, is WA getting enough help at a federal level for the work that we're doing in diversification? Well, I'll start with you, Deputy Premier.
So there's a couple of questions, a couple of points there. I think we are starting to attract more people from the East Coast, although it is difficult when you have the level of employment that we see across the country. We're out in the market at the moment. I go to conferences on the East Coast, and they say, could you just stop talking about these bloody WA ads all the time? You know, so we know we're having an impact, but they do need. We do need to continue to try to make sure that we get that message across. I think that the federal government's response has been a point of disappointment. I don't mean that in a partisan way. But the fact that we aren't in a position to process people's visas so that they can come to this country is a source of immense disappointment. I was in the UK earlier in the year. We sat down with a bunch of migration agents. At that point in time, they hadn't hit their hyperinflation period, but they were saying, yes, you know, most people have got jobs, but we've still got about 80,000 people on our books who want to come to Australia because of the lifestyle. And they're saying between 30 and 40% of those want to come to Western Australia. They're just saying we just can't get them through the door. And so that must be one of the great own goals of the international labour market at the moment. Yes, housing and other aspects of our economy are struggling, but I mean, we'll work through these in time, and we'll find our way through to meet that balance. But certainly the Commonwealth has, I think, let the country down. Each of the states' economies are trying to attract people, and the fact that we aren't in a position to welcome these workers into Australia is, as I said, a source of immense disappointment.
I might go to the floor and see if we have any questions there. I do believe we have one over that way. There we are. No, well, if you would like to ask a question, there is a microphone there. But in the meantime, so I've got a microphone.
On the subject of access to talent, I think for us, the access to talent issue is a huge one in tech. They talk about the war for talent in tech, and there's an escalating arms race on salaries, on perks, and all sorts of stuff to actually attract people. The point about critical mass is actually a really important one. I think the people who are wanting to work, certainly in places that aren't traditionally in tech, sure, you can attract them with lifestyle. I think that's really important because people won't move unless it's a nice place to live. But certainly things like job security and opportunity is important. The ability for you to stay in a place and move career potentially within the sector or move jobs within a sector. If there aren't other companies, other tech companies, for instance, who are also, sort of seen as prominent and able to take you on, your job prospects start to diminish. And so your risk-taking of wanting to move to a place like WA, where we're not necessarily seen as a traditional tech hub, is actually a really, really big risk for you if you're particularly moving your family and so on. So we've actually historically found that, hiring 3 excellent engineers is fantastic, it's easy to do. Hiring 30 is really hard to do. And so, we've got to find ways, I guess, centrally of being able to, as I said, build that critical mass. And whether it means having a program that actually allows really, really world-class talent like Dawn and others to actually come here, subsidised by the government or otherwise, to actually say, hey, look, we can actually use it as a honeypot to actually attract other talent in, because some of the world-class people are in this place working on some really amazing stuff. But it takes time, it takes sort of an investment. And that's actually really important as well, because if people don't see any value in coming here in the long term, then we don't actually keep and retain that talent, even if we do manage to attract it.
Well, it opens up an interesting question that I've got from the panel, from the audience, and that is, how can businesses work together to try and support that diversification strategy? Is it about making sure that it's really clear that there is a pipeline of similar or associated businesses that you might move into? Are there other ways that businesses could collaborate? And I might ask this one to Stephanie, you might have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think one way we're collaborating at the moment, so I can see them in the audience, so Sam from Western Power, they're going to go overseas on a bit of a recruitment drive, and actually we're a much smaller company than Western Power, and they're going to help us source some of the critical shortages that we've got in our power sector. So that's sort of, I guess, one way that we can do it. It's a bit like, I guess, a trade mission idea, but if we're going to go out to market, can we go and do it in a way that we attract some different pools of talent from maybe more than one industry? I do think we have to solve the immigration problem, though. Like it's pronounced, and housing remains a real issue. So I think something else that we can do within the sector as well is really encourage more entry-level roles. We really need to get more apprentices and trainees with a really good career path ahead of them. That of course plays on the existing domestic market typically, though. But I think it is really important to diversify through both youth, both disability, some other sort of untapped areas. Can we get people back into the workforce in a way that's meaningful for them as well? So there are maybe some pools that we could access that overcome some of the challenges that we've got in the short term with overseas immigration and housing.
And Dawn, I know you're back to the US. You've been back a couple of times, unfortunately, for the not quite off the launchpad Artemis
Not yet.
missions. But and you're looking to go back again. I hope you are out banging the drum for WA. But is there something that you think is there a silver bullet? Is there a secret sauce that we need to be incorporating in to bring more talent in?
Well, I think the secret sauce is complicated, right? But I think the complexity of the problems that we're solving, that's what technology type of people are drawn to, right? They're looking for the hard problems, and what that means is we need to support them in investing in those solutions so that they'll come up with, but we need to make sure that they feel invested in. I think we've got, when we talk about, and WA does this, they talk about resources as an industry rather than resources as a system problem, and the problems that are being resolved, meaning, you know, how we're extracting minerals is a system, and, you know, the missions we fly in space are systems. And when we think about the complexity of those systems, we can't. Not one person can resolve this. Not one person can build this. And so it takes bringing together a bunch of different types of domains and different types of expertise to pull that off. And I think that means that we should be able to, you know, again, look across those systems and take advantage of the knowledge and sort of the depth of experience that's in those other domains and apply them to new technologies like space in WA.
Fantastic. There's a question that sits very, very high on the voting list, so I'm going to ask it, and it's an interesting one because it's not specifically to the discussion we're having, but it is one of the constraints that we're facing, and that is how do business and government work together in WA to tackle the issue of homelessness and housing affordability. And we've mentioned housing a few times as one of the issues. It's a root cause of people coming or not coming in many ways. So how do we address that? And I will start with you, Deputy Premier, as you're the most qualified.
Well, look, not all homeless. Excellent. I'm gone. Hello? Am I still on?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
No, I don't think any of us are. We might need to project.
Okay. So I was going to say, look, not all homelessness is a question of supply and demand. Homelessness is a social problem as much as it is a supply problem and an affordability issue. So as a former Minister for Mental Health, can I just say that, you know, the underinvestment in that sector, almost regardless of which society or where you look, is something which I think we as a nation are going to have to confront at some point in time, just to understand that that the level of mental health issues out there requires a complex and comprehensive response. So I just want to sort of make that comment to start with. The second aspect is those who are simply being squeezed out of a hypermarket. I remain optimistic that we will continue to see a strong flow of construction, of residential construction, come through the system over the next 12 months. We, as a government, are starting to see a bit more interest from builders now to pitch for medium-sized builds. So that's sending a signal to us that there is starting to come some capacity is starting to come back into that industry. We know the supply chains are still constrained, and we've got a bunch of work to do around that. But we believe, but if we're looking at the prices coming off of a lot of our container shipping at the moment in terms of the costs associated with each brick. And so that's suggesting that there's a bit of a heat coming out of that market as well, which might see those supply chain constraints start to be rectified. So that's, I guess, the higher level view. The governments have a responsibility, though, just to make sure that we have enough social housing for people to be able to not be left behind. And I think in Western Australia we'll continue to see a growth in house prices, regardless of the amount of stock that's brought onto the market. And so we'll need to continue to support Minister Carey, the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, to build that, continue to grow that social housing stock.
Fantastic. I think we've got time just for one last question. I'm actually going to put to Peter first, but I'll work my way along the panel. The Minister... Roger, you used the phrase about, when you talked about COVID, about the value of seeing all the different sides of your portfolio when you were working through COVID. And the clarity that sticks in my mind about what those years was like is that there was an enormous amount of focus from government, but also from the public, from business. People pulled together. There was a real unity in the way that we addressed what was an unprecedented challenge. I'd like to maybe ask each of the panellists to think about what would they like to see in terms of the focus and unity of business in Western Australia to try and tackle the 2035 challenges that we're talking about today. And I might start with Peter. What do you ask of the audience here?
What I ask of the audience? To buy the vision. I think the Deputy Premier has clearly articulated a vision for 2035 for this state. Come on board. Let's all get behind this. This is a moment, I think this is a unique moment in time. I keep saying this. You know, we've got a real opportunity here in Western Australia to take us to the next level. And by diversifying our economy and going to these other areas, maintaining resources is our bedrock. Don't ever forget that. But this is a moment when we can actually change the narrative and see a vision which is pretty damn exciting. And it's a place that you want to be. I want to be the destination state.
Steph, what do you think?
It's hard to follow, isn't it? This one? Yeah. I would say, I guess if I reflect on a week in the news or the last couple of weeks in the news, I guess build on your buy into the vision comment. An energy transition or a transition of an economy in the way that we're talking about, which is huge diversification from a destination that is quite focused on, I guess, primary mining into something that's much richer and much more diverse and much more inclusive as a society. It does require you to dig a little bit deeper than just the headlines. There's some really, I think we've got this, there is a real danger in sort of jumping to outrage all the time. It's actually quite hard to completely change your business from the thing that it does today to the vision that we've been talking about for 2035. And I think there is so much leadership, so we can really lean into the space of what would it take, how is it possible, rather than to really go on the attack for where companies are today. I think everyone is trying really hard to get to a very clean, very green space that has benefits for the entire community. And by that I mean First Nations people actually participating in the outcome, the community where the activity's done also sharing in the benefits and the spoils of this rather than it being in the hands of very few. But to do that, you've got to allow people to lead from where they are today and to transition. So I guess I would ask that we try to go just that little bit deeper than collective outrage, in the moment, because I just think it's quite unfair, and it means that we're not having a great dialogue about, hey, what would it take? Let's get behind this. What would it take?
Fantastic. Marcus?
I think for me, it's clear that most of you in the room are probably going through some sort of investment in digital transformation or innovation. I think it's a fairly key investment in most of our organisations. What I'd say, and they're clearly different things, and as levers to productivity, incredibly important, particularly if we're going to go to diversification. I'd ask that if you do have a budget for it, double it, and if at all possible, buy local.
Dawn, what would you say?
So I'm gonna fuss at my audience. Space is new in WA. I know this, but I really want you to think about the fact that space actually has almost every industry that's in the room and beyond has a role that also applies to has application in space, like space law and food production and agriculture in space, et cetera. And so when I was like, hey, come build a spacecraft, it's super fun, and everyone laughs, I want next year that not to be funny. I want it to be true and for everybody to embrace that. And so that would be my request for the audience.
Fantastic. And Deputy Premier, to finish us off.
Well, look, the answer lies in this room, and it's the people who are sitting here today, the leaders, those of you who lead yourselves, your teams, your companies. It's a matter of that self-belief. And I was reflecting on Marcus's comment before about creating that critical mass, and my mind turns to the head of Jens from the Australian Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. He says manufacturing is not a sector, it's a capability. And that goes to your point too, Dawn, is that we have capability right across our economy. And if we work together in a collaborative way, we will achieve the goals that we are seeking to achieve. But I just also want to say, from my comments from the beginning of the panel, don't just chase the next price point of the resources sector. I mean, we can do that. The problem in WA is we'll probably make a pretty good living doing that. Let's stretch ourselves. Let's buy the vision, as Peter says, and let's support one another in chasing this diversified, value-added proposition which provides such great prosperity and a beautiful community for our people.
Fantastic. On that wonderful note, thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
And what a great conversation we had today. So I would like to extend my thanks to our speakers today, Deputy Premier, Don, Marcus, Stephanie, Peter, and Ruth, for making yourselves available to participate in this robust conversation with a CEDA audience. I'm really optimistic and inspired, as all of you are, by the insights of today's discussion, some of which are, this is the season of change and innovation. WA is open for business and is where nature, community, culture, heritage, science, and technology connect. WA has all the mineral elements needed for green energy, from generation to end use. And our remote operations capability is closer to space than what we think. So like Stephanie says, if we don't try, we don't get started. And in summary, we as a state and a community have what it takes to make WA more sustainable, smarter, and diversified today and for decades to come. So thank you again to ARUP and the Department of Jobs, Science, Tourism and Innovation for your ongoing support and for what we're seeing today, this vision becoming reality. And if you have enjoyed today's event, let's continue the conversation in 2 upcoming CEDA events. Next Wednesday, the 2nd of November, we are hosting the Honorable Alana McTiernan for a discussion on the work being undertaken to the transition in the Collie region with new opportunities for the future. And on Thursday, 25 November, we will be welcoming the CEO of TransAlta, John Cousineris from Canada. And he's going to share how they are managing challenges in transition and how to capitalize on opportunities that can be realized by doing decarbonization well. So once again, thank you so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day. And quoting again the Deputy Premier, let's be bold together. Thank you.